Okay, good morning. We're learning Tractate Eruvin, chapter 7. The name of the chapter is Chalon, and page 79. We're learning for Shalema to our friend Daniel Ben Simcha.
Yeah, how is he?
And all those who need for Shalema. Also learning Lil Nishmas Chernia about Lipman and Gavril Yaakov Ben Hirsch. So we'll start with
Induce it. Still.
we ended up yesterday question about using straw to fill a ditch. So we said that to create a mechitza with a straw, to create a partition with a straw, everyone agrees that it's considered a partition. But creating a regarding closing up the hollow of the ditch, it's not so obvious that it's going to be effective. So he says like this. The Gemara tells us that if he nullifies it, he batle, meaning if he abandons the straw, meaning that it's not going to remove it from the ditch, then it closes up the ditch. Closing up the ditch means closing up the separation, so therefore creating one domain between the two domains. If you have two domains and in between there is the ditch, so if the ditch is filled with straw, we said it's not good, but now the Gemara differentiate whether he abandons the straw and therefore he's not going to take it or not. So if he abandons the straw, it closes up the ditch, and if he does not abandon the straw, it does not close up the ditch. Comes the Mishnah and says one mole off, meaning if he filled the ditch with earth, afilu bistama, meaning even when his intent was unknown, we're not sure what his intent was. What would be the why is it so obvious that it's going to do its job, that it's effective? Because the Mishnah said that if you fill the ditch with earth and pebbles, you can make one eruv, two eruvim, do whatever you want. Meaning it fixes the problem. So why is it so obvious? What about his intent? Afilu bistama, the Gemara asks, question mark. What about his intent? Maybe he's going to remove this dirt. But a house filled with straw or pebbles, and he abandoned them, bottle, and then it's nullified. The house is considered completely filled. And if a corpse is inside, the tumor rises through the roof. So we should conclude to the same thing over here. In our case, bit loy ein, if he abandons the straw or pebbles, they are indeed considered permanently in place. Loy bit loy, but if he did not abandon the straw and pebbles, they're not considered permanently in place. So why does the Mishnah rule, without telling us what was the intent, that pebbles close the ditch even without a declaration of abandonment? Maybe he doesn't have to say anything.
Pebbles is dirt.
It's like small rocks. Some people put it in front of their house.
The white ones, they like the white ones.
Avuna man tana olis, who taught the aforementioned Mishnah in Tractate Eruvin. Actually, many times before they do concrete, before they pour concrete, they put rocks. So these rocks are some called pebbles.
Yeah. No, but for drainage also.
Yeah, whatever the purpose is, but so they put lime rocks on the ground. Anyhow, so Amar Avuna Mantana Oles, who taught the aforementioned Mishnah in Tractate Eruvin. that a house, you filled it up with straw, and that the tumah goes up through the roof, and it depends on your intention. But if you abandoned the straw, he made a declaration, so it's considered a permanent filling of the building and become merged with the house. And the tumah of a corpse, if there was a corpse inside the house, it goes through the roof. So he says, who taught us? Who told it to us? The Gemara answers it was Rabbi Yossi. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Rabbi Yossi, if you maintain that Rabbi Yossi taught the Mishnah in always, we have heard the opposite, the contrary opinion, the Tanya. If you filled up a house with straw, and the owner does not plan to remove the straw from the house, so the straw is like regular, ordinary earth, and it's bottle. It is considered permanently in place. If it is filled with earth, and the owner will remove it in the future, then it's like ordinary straw and it's not abandoned. So if he had in mind if he said, I'm not going to remove it, it's considered awful, like dirt, and it's nullified. It's considered permanently in place. If he had in mind to offer that you have two cases over here. You have a case of teven and a case of dirt. Teven is considered like awful bottle. It's like considered like dirt, earth, and it's permanently in place. Awful was nefanosoi, but if we're dealing with earth, he filled up a house with earth, and the owner will remove it in the future. Now the awful is considered like straw. Before we said the straw is considered like earth. Now we're saying the earth would be considered like straw, and it's not abandoned. So it says in number 1, therefore, in the absence of an express declaration of abandonment, meaning you didn't say anything, you didn't express anything that you're going to abandon whether the straw or you're going to abandon the earth, the roof of the house still covers a space at least of a tefach high underneath, and intervenes to prevent tumah from rising above it. Ella.
Wait a minute. Okay, we got the corpse. So now either we're covering it with dirt in the house, or we're covering it with the straw in the house, right? This is the issue here that in this paragraph.
The Gemara is trying to bring a proof from the case in Olois that you need to have a declaration. In the Mishnah, it says that if you filled up the ditch with dirt or pebbles, you can do whatever you want, meaning the intention doesn't have to be there.
So so then you can make the huts or
the Mishnah says you can do either 1 eruv or 2 eruvim. When you say that you can do 1 eruv, it means that it becomes 1 yard, or you can do 2 eruvim. You have the choice, either or. So the Gemara says, why is it that you don't have to make a declaration? Why don't you need to nullify the earth? How do I know that the earth that you filled up the ditch with is going to stay there? And the Gemara brings a proof from Orlos. What's the story with Orlos? You have a house, you filled up the house with straw or earth, and there's a dead person there.
Right.
So we learned that the tumah flies through the roof.
Correct.
Comes out through the roof.
Okay, I got that.
But when is the tumah leaves the house?
When it's open.
When you nullified the earth or the straw. So how come in that case you need to nullify, and in our case you don't have to have any kind of declaration?
So wait a minute, if the corpse, if you want to stop the tumah, you have to nullify the dirt or the straw, or the opposite?
Yeah, you do have to nullify it. So that's what the Gemara we just read it. It says like this.
All right.
It says,
By-
Bait shemiloi teven otzoros, a house was filled with straw or pebbles, uvitloi, and he abandoned them. He abandoned them by declaring he will not remove them, so that they become permanent, filling the building. Bottle, they become merged with the house. The house is considered completely filled, and if a corpse is inside, the tumor rises through the roof. Okay? Now, that's only when he bitloi, he abandoned. That's where the focus over here.
So this is like a cemetery.
If he abandoned the pebbles or straw,
Yeah.
the tumor comes out. But if he did not abandon, it's not coming out. So how come in our case he doesn't have to abandon the earth when he filled up the ditch? He doesn't have to abandon.
Why,
The
if he
Mishnah,
abandoned the tumor goes out?
he doesn't have anything in the house. The house is like the house is filled with things that is not his, and there's no room for tumor. The tumor lives. But if it's his possessions,
He'll take this
his
pebble.
possessions, the possessions should become whatever he possessed in the house should be tameh also. You know, in the case of Metzorah, it says that the Kohen would tell the guy to before he calls the Kohen, he tell him to clear up the house. Why? Because if he says that the house is tameh, immediately the vessels become tameh. So over here, it's not his; it's nullified. Why? Because he made a verbal declaration that he's abandoning everything. You understand? The whole case of Olos is just to prove it's actually come to challenge the Mishnah
Yeah.
that you need to nullify the earth.
You need the
The
declaration.
Mishnah doesn't say that you need to nullify the earth. The Mishnah just says if the ditch is filled up with earth or pebbles, it becomes one or shoot, everything is fine.
So, okay, but in a cemetery, right, all the tumor from the cemetery goes all the way up to the sky, you know?
But it's not yours.
No, I'm saying you're buried.
I don't know. I don't know what's the story.
Alright,
Cemetery. It's not discussing
Okay,
cemetery.
all right,
It's discussing a house.
I was just trying to understand with the house. We say that.
But
the
a house is not a cemetery. A house
No,
is
I know,
a
but
house
you're-
is a case of a oihel. Oihel is something that has a roof.
Right. I know, but here we're saying we're going to put all the dirt out in the house. We have have the mace in the house, and we're putting all the dirt. Then we're saying mavato to the dirt, and therefore.
But he's not saying that. He's not saying that this is the method of getting rid of the tumor. He says if you filled up a house with straw and pebbles, and we found out there's a corpse there, the tumor would live through the roof. It might
Right.
be a method, but
Okay. All right. Whatever. Okay.
but the point is that the whole reason for the Gemara to introduce the case in Ola is just to prove me that I do need to nullify.
Okay.
I need
Declaration.
to abandon.
All right.
Declaration, verbal, not verbal, at least to have intent, whatever. But how come the Mishnah does not? So the Gemara says, who is it? So the Gemara answered, it's Rabbi Yossi. The Rabbi Yossi said this idea, this rule in Olos, if a house is filled up with straw and earth, it leaves the tumor would go through the roof. So, Rabbi Yossi, so the Gemara says one thing. If it's Rabbi Yossi, we heard the opposite from Rabbi Yossi. We have heard that he expressed a contrary opinion, the Tanya, for it was taught in the Bible. Rabbi Yossi says regarding a house with a corpse inside. Teven veinos sidafanos. If it is filled with straw and the owner will not remove the straw in the future, areihu, so this straw is considered like offer, kistam offer, uvotel. It's like an ordinary earth and it's considered bottle, merged. It is considered permanently in place. Offer v'osi lefanoisoi. If it is filled with earth and the owner will not, the owner will remove it in the future. Areu kistam teven v'lebot. It's like ordinary straw, and it is not nullified. It is not abandoned. So he says in number 1, therefore, in the absence of express declaration of abandonment, the roof of the house still covers a space, at least a tefach high underneath, and intervenes to prevent tumah from rising above. It doesn't allow the tumah to leave, because he did not abandon the straw or the dirt. We conclude that Rabbi Yossi maintains that earth and pebbles are abandoned as a matter of course without any declaration of abandonment. This is contrary to the Mishnah in Olos and contradicts Rav Huna contention. Therefore, the resolution of the two Mishnahs is revised. Elam Ravasi, Man Tana Eruvin. Who taught the ruling of our Mishnah in Eruvin? Who is the author of the Mishnah? Rabbi Yossi. It is Rabbi Yossi. However, the Mishnah in Olos records a dissenting opinion that pebbles are not ordinarily considered abandoned, but must be declared abandoned to be considered merged.
What is the difference between merge and abandon?
They're
No,
mixed
through
with something.
Through the abandonment, it makes it merged. What does merge mean? It becomes one with something. So the abandonment leads it to be merged. If I don't abandon, then it has a separate entity. Okay? So what is the Mishnah in Olos records? That pebbles are not ordinarily considered abandoned. He needs to verbally say it, but must be declared abandoned to be considered merged. The Gemara presents another resolution of the conflicting Mishnayos. Rav Huna Bredi Rav Yeshua Omar. Tuma Shabbos Koromis. Are you contrasting the laws of Tuma discussed in the Mishnah in Olos with the laws of Shabbos discussed in our Mishnah? But they cannot be compared. Hanach Isu Shabbos. Leave the prohibition of the Shabbos out of this discussion of whether pebbles and earth are ordinarily considered abandoned. Why? Because a person abandons even a purse filled with money on Shabbos because it may not be moved. So therefore, although pebbles and earth ordinarily are not considered abandoned, when it comes to Shabbos, they are so considered on the Shabbos because, meaning they are considered abandoned on Shabbos because they may not be moved. He said, don't compare the two cases. Olos is one and Shabbos is something else, because Shabbos people would even abandon their wallet. The Gemara presents yet another resolution of the two Mishnahs. Ravashi Omar Bais Achorutz Koromis. Are you contrasting a house with a ditch? What is the comparison to a house and a ditch? These cases cannot be compared. Bishlam Achoritz is understandable in the case of a ditch. If we presume that the pebbles which fill it are abandoned, Lemityame Koi, because a ditch is customarily filled in. When you fill up a ditch, if you have a ditch in your yard and you fill it up, it's obvious that you want the pebbles to stay there. Or you're going to come back and create a ditch again. However, it is customary to fill a house, meaning he says it's not the same case. A house, it's not customarily being filled with straw and pebbles. And when it comes to a ditch, it's customarily to fill it up with pebbles and dirt. So obviously, it's obvious that it should be there. You don't need to declare, I'm leaving the pebbles in this ditch. When it comes to a house, it's not a normal thing to fill up a house with
ditch and pebbles. Earth and pebbles.
Yeah. Once a second cousin of mine, he bought a house in Reading, Pennsylvania. It's like a hick town, and bought like a house for like $6,000. So it was like, but he said he needed like 10 dumpsters to empty the house. He says the house was, he told me, as if a garbage truck went and pulled the garbage into the house.
People are crazy.
filled up the house with garbage.
Wow.
Yeah, they use the house as a garbage
Wow.
storage. So that's not a normal thing, right? Well, that's what the Gemara tells us. This is not a normal thing to fill up a house with pebbles and earth. So obviously you need the declaration, the guy is nullifying it. But when it comes to a ditch, it's a normal thing to fill up a ditch with pebbles.
Yeah.
So I don't need a declaration. That's another tirutz, another answer why you shouldn't compare ditch to a house. And so the answer before was that don't compare Tuma to Shabbos. Shabbos people are willing to nullify even more expensive things
Money.
because they can't. They know they can't move it on Shabbos. No, so he said if one placed over the ditch instead of pebbles and earth, he put a board that is 4 tfachim wide, 20 inches board. We learned that a board 4 tfachim wide is required only when you placed the length of the board across the width of the ditch to serve as a bridge across the ditch. However, if you placed it along the length of the ditch, afilu kolshu, even if a board of minimal width suffices to permit the chatzeros to join in a mutual eruv, since he reduced the ditch, the width of the ditch, to less than 4 tefachim wide, hence the section of the ditch is considered a portal between the two chatzeros. So if you look at the diagram, it shows you the ditch is 4 tefachim wide. Now he comes and he places the board along the ditch, right? If he does it le'okoi, he put it along the length of the ditch,
Okay.
even if it's smaller than 4, it's fine. Why? Because now the ditch is not 4.
It connects.
No, I'm saying the ditch becomes smaller than
narrower.
it's narrower.
Wow.
It's not 4 tfachim. But if he places it lerochboi, he creates a bridge. It seems like it's not the right way to do it.
It has to be 4 tefachim wide.
It would have to be 4 tefachim. So when do I need 4 tefachim? When you do it, when you create a bridge. But I guess it's also with the sulam, we learned with the ladder that it's sufficient, something that is sufficient to stand on. It's wide enough to stand on. But when you put it along the length, then you don't even have, it does not have to be 4 tefachim. V'chen shtei gzuzos trois zu keneged zu. Similarly, 2 balconies, right, which sides face each other precisely, balcony in front of balcony. They are bridged with a board 4 tefachim wide. Amar Rav Aoder Omar, this rule that you have said, zu keneged zu, when one balcony faces the other precisely, ein, the board indeed connects them. Zu shelo keneged zula, but if one balcony does not face the other precisely, the board does not connect them. V'zu lemala mizu nami. Also, if one balcony is above the other balcony, the board connect them.
Cannot.
The board cannot connect them. So it needs to be precisely, not if it's not precisely whether higher, lower, or sideways, it's not good. So this is similar to the ladder again, only when there are at least 3 tefachim of space between the balconies. Aval ein ben zeh lezeh shloshet tefachim, if there's no 3 tefachim, but zot rakumai The two balconies are considered one crooked balcony, and the two residents may join in a mutual eruv, even if the balconies do not face each other precisely. So when we say precisely, it means within 3 tefachim, but if it's less than 3 tefachim, it's fine. Meaning if the gap between them, if they're not so precise, there's at least a difference between one balcony and the other. So look at A and B and C, like in the diagram you can see. So A is the classical case. And then you put a board between the two balconies and you can walk, right, from one balcony to the other.
Yeah.
Balcony B is a problem because one is higher than the other.
C is good. If you put the board between them.
Yeah, C is good. And D, if it could be also good if it's not more than 3. Okay, nu Mishnah, matben sheben shte chatzeros. If a haystack between two chatzeros, gavara sot tefachim. So this is like I said, packed straw. Haystack is a packed straw. You now using it as a wall. Gavara sot tefachim. It has 10 tefachim high. But what's the famous saying? Needle in a haystack, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to find a needle inside the haystack. So over here, 10 tefachim high, completely separate the chatzeros. Ma'ovin shnaim. So if they want to make an eruv, they need to make 2 eruvim. 2, right? The residents of the 2 chatzeros may make 2 independent eruvs. Because of the wall, it's a real mechitza. Ve'en ma'ovin echad. And they may not make 1 eruv.
Making 2 rules, meaning that I have to bring food and the other guy has to bring food. This is making 2 rules.
No, each one has to make a plate. Each chatzer, they have to make their own plate. Elu ma'achilim mikan. These residents of the one chatzer may feed their livestock from here. Ve'elu ma'achilim mikan. And those residents may feed their livestock from here. So they have animals. So the animals eating the wall, this haystack. So each one eats from a different side. If haystack is in the middle, the animals of this chatzer would eat from here. The animals
could be diminished.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be finished eventually because you're going to eat it up. That's why you bought it for.
Ve'elu atem masot tefachim. No, nitma'et atem masot tefachim. Here he speaks about it. If before the Shabbos the height of the straw was reduced, me'ovin echod, they may make 1 common eruv. Ve'in ma'ovin shnaim, but they may not make 2 eruvs. Why? Since the legal breach has been created in the partition, the 2 chatzeros are considered 1 area.
Oh, easy.
Our Mishnah allowed one to feed his livestock on the Shabbos from the haystack that divides the chatzeros. The owner may have his animals eat from the haystack only if he does not put straw into his basket and feed them from it, because in such a case we are concerned that he may unwittingly take too much straw and invalidate the partition. So we don't want you to break the partition on Shabbos, so you should not take it into a basket and feed the animals. Let them eat by themselves. Look, Mishori. And it is permitted to stand the animal over the straw, to bring her into the straw. The Gemara says, is it okay or not? Uluk Mishori, is it okay to bring the animal there and to hold it there? A person may stand his animal over grass on the Shabbos because we are not concerned that he might uproot the grass for his animal. But a person may not stand his animal over fodder that is muktzeh on Shabbos. Which fodder is muktzeh on Shabbos? For example, straw which has been designated for building purposes.
Ah,
This is the same idea as what we learned yesterday about someone that places the fig, unripe fig, in the straw, which is the only issue. The only concern that we had, why can't he take the fig? He is allowed to, but if the fig is sticking out,
Maser.
because of the straw is made for building. Remember,
Not the maser. The maser is the other example. It may grows, and the maser was not.
No, the other example was a dough that was placed in the straw to complete its baking, right? But the issue with straw, we read, it was also in the note. The issue with the straw was that it's a building material. It's like touching bricks on Shabbos. Same idea. Back then, they used to make houses with straw, mixing it with mud and water, and that creates and when it dries up. So that's the muktzah. Since the prohibition of muktzah is only rabbinical in origin, we are concerned that he might inadvertently handle the muktzah himself. Similarly, since the prohibition of taking the straw from the partition is also only rabbinical in origin, leading an animal to the straw should also be prohibited, because he might come to remove the straw himself. How come you're not concerned that he might remove the straw? You see, so with grass, I'm not so concerned that he's going to do a biblical prohibition. But the rabbinical prohibition, I have more concern that he might do it. Because it's rabbinical, he's not as careful. So the Gemara says, the Mishnah does not speak of his physically leading the animal to the haystack. Rather, it allows the owner only to stand in front of the animal, to block it from going elsewhere. So he's standing there so the animal wouldn't go anywhere. So it doesn't go anywhere, might as well will eat. And the animal will go to the straw of its own accord and eat from it. Since he may not actually lead the animal to the haystack, he will not inadvertently handle the straw himself. And one may not put straw from the haystack into his basket. Tanya, Bait ben shtei chatzeros is a house that is between two chatzeros. A house, two chatzeros on both sides. Umilo teven, he filled up. Again, is filling up the house with straw. Me'ovin shnayim, they, the resident of the two chatzeros, may make two independent eruvs. Ve'ein me'ovin echod, but may not make one mutual eruv, since there is no connection between them. Ze noisen leser kupose v'yachil, ve'ze noisen leter kupose v'yachil. The resident of this chotzer may put straw into their basket and feed it to the animals, and the resident of this other chotzer may put straw into their basket and feed it to their animals. If the height of the straw was reduced from 10 tfachim, Shnei Masurim, the residents of both chatzeros, are prohibited from taking additional straw. Keitzad oisa, how should he act to permit carrying from the middle house into at least one of the chatzeros? Noyeles beisa, he should lock his house, umevateles reshusei, and relinquish his rights in the middle house to the residents of the other chotzer. Who also, he is prohibited to carry from the middle house into his chotzer, because it now belongs to the other chotzer. His friend in the other chotzer is permitted to carry from the middle house, because it is now part of his chotzer. So what do we have here? It's an interesting case, because you have a house in the middle, and 1 yard and 1 yard. Yeah. So, and this house is filled with straw. It's like a storage house now. You said you need to make 2 eruvs, and in order for them to be able to take from the house, right? But you said even when they take, once it gets to less than 10, they're not allowed to touch it anymore.
But they live in the Chatzir?
Yeah, let's say they have a house that's in the Chatzir, and then the Chatzir. But we are not concerned with their houses, we're concerned with the Chatzir. That's why I mentioned Chatzir. But this concept we discussed before, that someone has the right or the ability to relinquish his rights, and by doing so, he permits the other side to carry. So when do we have to relinquish the rights? Once the haystack is less than 10. Now we can use this, so call it a trick. We can use this trick of at least allowing the other guy to take.
Yeah.
But why is it, if it's less than 10 tefachim, why they're not allowed to take from it anymore?
Because they didn't join the roof.
No, so he writes that if at a height of less than 10 tefachim, the haystack can no longer function as partition between the 2 houses.
Oh.
So if it's not a partition, the entire area of the 3 houses becomes one large chatzir, into which the residents of neither chatzir may carry. I guess it changes the status of what it is.
Become one.
Let's look. If you look at the diagram, you see that there is houses in the other side.
Oh,
You see,
okay.
house chatzir, and you see it calls it a shed.
With shed.
Shed is like a storage
Keep the
house.
tools and
People
stuff
pay-
there.
In your community, you're not allowed to have a shed. You can buy in Home Depot like 20 by 10 by 10 or 15 by 15. It's like a small house that you build.
Oh, okay.
It's metal walls sometimes, and people use it for storage.
I can't- I can't
In American homes, you see it. Some houses they have. They store the tools. It's like another garage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had it in New Jersey.
But in this case, right? In this case, what they do with it, they fill it up with straw. That was food for animals.
Okay, we could do that.
You have shed A, shed B, and in between this, I guess this haystack.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So the Gemara says, "V'chen ata imer v'goiv shel teven shebein beis tchum Shabbos." Similarly, you would say in regard to a wide pit of straw that is between the 2 Shabbos techums of 2 cities. Okay?
Yeah.
A wide pit of straw is between 2 Shabbos techums of 2 cities, that the straw may be taken from each side.
Okay.
Ktanim yet. In any case, it was taught in the aforementioned bite. The resident of this chatzar may put straw from the middle house into their basket and feed their animals, feed it to their animals, and the other residents. And the residents of this other chatzar may put straw into their basket and feed it to their animals. This contradicts Rav Huna's contention that straw which divides 2 chatzeros may not be handled. You just allow the animals to eat it, but you cannot take and put it in a basket. So this is a question on the Gemara. Amrei Bais in the Braisa's case of a house that was filled with straw, since there is ceiling and walls, when the haystack becomes diminished, it is noticeable, since the space between the top of the haystack and the ceiling increases. There is more space between the ceiling and the haystack. However, here in the case of the Mishnah, it is not noticeable when the haystack becomes diminished, since it stands outside and there is no ceiling. So in one case it's diminished, and one case it's noticeable, the diminishment is noticeable, and in the other case the diminishment is not noticeable. The Gemara now scrutinizes the Braisa cited above. If the height of the straw, the haystack, the straw, was reduced from 10 tefachim, it's less than 50 inches. Shnei Asur, in the residents of both chatzeros, are prohibited from taking additional straw.
How do you'll know? It's not noticeable.
It is noticeable because they have a roof.
No, in the pitch, in the ditch.
Oh, the ditch.
No, it's not a ditch, it's just a partition.
Ah, okay,
Partition.
Okay.
But you are correct. It's maybe not very noticeable, but let's say that they measured it.
On
They
Shabbat.
know the height is reaching their waist. Now it's less than their waist. So suddenly the animals ate from it and it's less. The residents of both Chazar are prohibited from taking additional straw. The Gemara infers that the prohibition applies only if the haystack is less than 10 tefachim high. Also, surely, but if it was 10 tefachim, if it had 50 inches, it is permissible to carry between the middle house and their respective chatzeros, since they are separated by straw partition in the middle house. And even though the ceiling is much higher than the top of the straw, Shmamina will learn from this. Partitions which do not reach the ceiling are considered valid partitions. That's what we call cubicles. There's many offices where you have cubicles.
Yeah.
They don't have room for everybody has his own office, so they make just a little wall.
I used to have one.
Yeah. So what is it?
There's a name for this.
4 feet or 5 feet high,
Yeah, it's where you have your.
and you don't have really privacy. Every time you speak, everybody hears you.
Yeah, it's like about like this. When you get the hutch, the desk, you have the computer over there in the corner. I was a supervisor. So
Workstation, like workstation.
Work, exactly. But the logic of this, I would have looked at it opposite. If the thing is less than 10 shvachim, so why would it be prohibited to use it? It's already like a nothing thing.
Yeah, because on Shabbos you're diminishing the wall.
But the wall's already diminished
you-
to 10, less than 10.
You once it's 10, it's a valid mechitza, and you're not compromising it. But the moment that you take it, you are compromising the wall.
Okay.
Okay, so think of it this way: if it's 10 tefachim high, it's two reshuyos, it's two different chatzeros,
Okay, I would buy that.
and once you reduce it, it's one chatzah.
That's
And
right.
if you actively doing it on Shabbos is a problem.
But wait a minute, it's already less than 10. Wait a minute, on the other page.
Yeah, but you're taking a partition and you are now you're getting rid of a partition.
Become one.
Yeah. If the wall is
I'm saying you didn't have, if it's less than 10, you don't have a partition anyway.
Yeah.
So if you don't have it anyway, if it goes to 0, what's the difference?
maybe there is some validity to it. You can say it doesn't exist completely. You can say, fine, it's not. But it's also there's also an issue on Shabbos. There's another issue. It's called noilod, meaning it's. Let's say you are correct that the partition is not considered partition
Right.
once it's reduced. But when was it reduced?
On Shabbat.
since it was reduced on
okay, if it went
Shabbat,
from over 10 to less than 10, then you got an issue. I see that.
saying you created, you nullified the partition on Shabbos.
Then it's a problem.
So then actively continuing to touch it would be a problem.
Okay, I see
That's good. That could be another thing.
that. Okay.
Here in the Bible, we're discussing a house whose ceiling is a trifle, whose ceiling is a trifle under 13 tfachim high.
Okay.
A little bit less than 13
All right.
tfachim. And Teben Asor. And so let's say it's 65 inches.
The roof is here, and then so it's like this. So the straw comes up to
The
here.
straw partition is 10 tfachim, right? Since the space between the ceiling and the top of the haystack is less than 3, right? Because it said trifle under 13.
All right, I got it.
By the rule of Lavud, you have the rule of Lavud. Remember, the rule of Lavud considers it 1. Even since it's less than 3, it's as if it's closed.
Mm-hmm.
So if the wall of my sukkah is above ground, less than 3 tfachim, I will still consider it as closed. Okay? So it is considered as if the straw extends to the ceiling.
So therefore, you wouldn't want to mess with this.
So the Gemara presents another alternative explanation of the Baita. Rav Huna, Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehoshua, said, "Afilu tema bevaisa." So even if you say that the house is 10 tfachim high, v'teven shiva mashu, and the straw is only a trifle over 7,
Okay, this is bad. Yes.
it is a valid partition. Why? Since any space of less than 3 tfachim is considered lavud, the straw is viewed as extending to the ceiling, thereby rendering it a partition 10 tfachim high. Bishlam ala Abaye, it is acceptable according to Abaye, who said that the haystack is actually measured 10 tfachim, 50 inches. The Kesani Masoro, for that is why the Baisa taught that the height of the haystack was reduced from 10 tfachim. However, according to Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehoshua, who said that the haystack measured only slightly more than 7 tfachim in height, my Masoro, what does the Baita mean when it says from 10 tfachim? The haystack was never that tall.
But the lavud makes it 10.
Right, but physically the haystack was never that tall. So, what do you mean with saying from 10 tfachim? You say from 7 tfachim he reduced it. Fine, you have the law of Lavud, but he should have said that it was reduced from 7. When you're reducing it, how much are you reducing? You're reducing it from 7. I can consider it as a wall of 10 tfachim, but once you take away from it, you're taking away from 7, not from 10.
Well, when you go that way, then you could say you could use it. They could eat. The animals could eat from this or whatever, or you could take away from that. If you say it's not the law of love, it doesn't apply because it's only 7 and 10. I'm just saying when you turn that around that way, I'm not.
Let's see. Materials Asor, the Baita means that the haystack was reduced from the legal status of 10 tfachim. So it says it was legally 10, and now it reduced from the legal status.
Okay.
Right, so it was, like you said, 7 and considered 10. So legally it has the status of 10. The moment you ate from it,
From 10.
you now took away from it the legal status of 10. Originally, when the haystack measured slightly more than 7 tfachim, the principle of Lavud allowed us to view it as extending a full 10 tfachim to the ceiling. However, when the height of the haystack falls below 7 tfachim, it is no longer regarded as extending to the ceiling. So that's what it means. It was reduced from the legal status of 10. The Baisa taught Shnei Nasurim. The residents of both Chatzeros are prohibited from taking more straw. if the height of the haystack was reduced from 10 tefachim, Shmamina, we can infer from this, Diyur in Aboim B'Shabbos Asur, that new residents who come to a chotzer on Shabbos, who have not joined in the Eruv, are prohibited from carrying, and cause the other residents of the chotzer to be prohibited as well. This rule applies only to the case of the baita where the resident of the outer houses acquired dominion over the entire middle house, only after the height of the haystack was diminished on the Shabbos. Even so, they are still prohibited. Let's see number 1. It says, although other versions state oisrin, they prohibit. Over here it says asurin. It says there's other versions, it says osrin. They prohibit all other residents from carrying. The import of the ruling is the same. The issue of whether the Shabbos arrival of new residents alters the status of a valid Eruv Chatzeros is disputed above. It's like if you have one yard that has 10 houses. 10 houses have access to it, but 3 of the houses are, we'll call them snowbirds. So the snowbirds are not there. So suddenly they showed up on Shabbat. They were not part of the Eruv. So not only that they cannot carry,
They knock everybody
The
out.
residents.
they knock everybody out.
They ruined the
Yes, they ruin the Eruv for everyone else. Then maybe they can relinquish their rights. Let's see, but they knock everybody out.
We don't have these problems now.
Well, the Rabbi would not do Eruv Chatzeros on Pesach. He does Eruv Chatzeros for everyone.
With the matzah, he does
Yeah.
it once a year.
Pesach, he does it.
Right. But I'm saying people come and go and nobody makes a big deal about
Right,
it.
because they're all part of it. He includes everyone. Probably that according to halacha, to see it in Shulchan Aruch, probably according to Shulchan Aruch, he can have everybody in mind and that's it. Otherwise, will be no end to it.
This here.
Yeah. Mishnah Berurah is interpretation on the Mishnah,
Right.
but the halacha I'm talking about
Allah,
actual
Shulchan Aruch, yeah.
Shulchan Aruch.
But this came after the Shulchan Aruch, right?
I don't think so.
No, Chafetz Chaim wrote it.
Interpretation on the Mishnah. The Mishnah is prior to Shulchan Aruch. Even if you wrote the interpretation on the Mishnah after Shulchan Aruch came out, but halachically, what's halacha? Maybe a lot of halachas are derived from Mishnah Berurah because of his interpretation of the Mishnah. But you have so many interpretations of the Mishnah. You have Shema Boeretiv, you have a lot of it.
There's no end to it.
This book is from
Hashem.
Chafetz Chaim.
No, this book is they're taking the Mishnayot, and it brings you that one of the commentaries on this the Mishnah is the Mishnah Berurah, which means clear Mishnah. So it interprets, explains the Mishnah. But the uniqueness of this book is that it has it also in English. That's the difference between a regular Mishnah with commentaries of the Mishnah Berurah and other commentaries. This one also has English. It's very important to learn Mishnah. They say that it affects, it washes off the neshama because Mishnah is the same letters as neshama, right?
So last night there was a yurt site over by Rabbi Naftali. So first they did the whole thing with the kufya test with the letters.
Right.
Then after they did that, then they did a Mishnah. Then he did the Mishnah.
Right. Why? Because Mishnah is neshama.
Right, he said.
So the Gemara comments that this ruling is not necessarily implied by the Brisa. Perhaps the haystack was diminished from yesterday before the Shabbos. Therefore, the resident of the outer houses were prohibited from carrying into the middle house even before the onset of the Shabbos, since they made no Eruv. Oh, you see what the problem is? Now I see what the problem is with the... It's not what I said. The problem is that you're knocking out the Eruv. The partition was used as the Eruv. You understand? So let's say you have, it's like a breach in the wall. You created a breach in the wall. So if you in Century Village, you have Eruv. What's the Eruv? That you have a fence around the Century Village. It's a great Eruv. But what happened if a tractor came and took 20 feet from the Eruv, knocked down the fence?
No anymore.
There's no Eruv anymore, right? Yeah. So if I'm in a yard, you are in a yard, and in between us there is a wall. So that wall is our Eruv. Yeah. The moment I'm diminishing the Eruv, each side is eating. It's less. Now I can't take from it anymore. Why? Because there's no Eruv. That's what he says over here. Perhaps the haystack was diminished from yesterday, before the Shabbos. Therefore, the residents of the outer houses were prohibited from carrying into the middle house even before the onset of Shabbat. Why? Since they made no Eruv. There's no Eruv. However, if the haystack became diminished on the Shabbat, carrying is still permitted even without an Eruv. That's also something we have to understand. Why they can carry without Eruv.
Okay,
if
so
the haystack became diminished on Shabbat, it says carrying is still permitted.
So go back to the mashal you said about Century Village. If the tractor trailer knocks down the wall on Shabbos, we still can carry them that was the only error.
No, you can't carry.
Okay, it happens at 11 o'clock.
There's opinion, the Gemara, that we learned that if the Eruv was sufficient at the beginning of Shabbat, it continues to be. But do you have an Eruv or not? It's not considered an Eruv.
So 11 o'clock in the morning, you'll finish carrying.
That's why a lot of people don't like to rely on the Eruv, because what happens if in the middle of Shabbat, if something happens to it? Comcast or FPL, they do some work on the poles and they cut down the... now you're violating a Shabbos prohibition. So if you don't have to carry, you shouldn't carry.
But it's shogeg, you don't know.
Fine, I'm saying, but if we don't have to carry, why should we carry?
I said this before. Rav Teitz in Elizabeth, New Jersey, he made the error, but he never held by the error.
He didn't use it. Not never held by it. He didn't use it. Because never held by it means that he doesn't believe in it.
Okay, he didn't use it.
He didn't use the Eruv. I'm sure if it was a time of Tchak that he had to, he would use it.
Yeah.
Because he would rely on his Eruv. If we don't rely on his Eruv, meaning that he's not doing a proper Eruv. But he did a proper Eruv, right. Just try not to use it.
We have to follow
the Rabbi over here also tries not to use it.
So we have to follow the same rule?
We should try. If we have to, if you have little kids and you have to carry carriages and stuff, it's something else.
If you gotta go 3 miles in the heat, or if it's gonna rain, it's not easy.
Mm-hmm. But if you don't have little kids, and you're not far from shul, you drink in the house, you walk here, no big deal, right? Rakitzad will say, how should he act to permit carrying from the middle house into at least one of the chatzerot? Notel et beito uvatel reshuso. He should lock his house and relinquish his right in the middle house to the resident of the other chatzer. Tarti. Both, why is it necessary to lock the house and renounce his right? Should either lock his house or relinquish his rights. By tema, Lolam Tarte actually, Kevan the Dashbe, since he is accustomed to carrying into the middle house, Atil Tatula, he might come to carry into it even now that the straw partition is abrogated. Hence, in addition to renouncing his right there, he must take extra precaution of locking his door. Who also he is prohibited to carry from the middle house, but his friend is permitted. That's if he relinquished his rights. Now his friend is allowed to carry. Pshita, Gemara says it's obvious, we learned it already. The Gemara says, no, this ruling is necessary because for the other one attempted to relinquish his rights to the little house back to his friend. And when people relinquish their rights back and forth in a chotzer for the benefit of the others may not turn around and afterward relinquish their rights back to the first party. It's a one-way street, you can't do it back and forth. Similarly, you would say regarding a pit of straw that is between two Shabbos tchumin of two cities, that the straw may be taken from each side. The Gemara answers, this ruling is necessary. Rabbi Akiva said that the laws of tchumin are biblical in origin. They're not rabbinical according to Rabbi Akiva, they're biblical. Sages should legislate against the use of the straw in the pit, because perhaps you might come to switch and mistakenly take the straw from beyond the tchum. Kamashma, the Baita informs us that no such legislation is required. New Mishnah, the Mishnah now discusses the practicals of particulars of making shitufim mevois, making the mavoi one, and the other people can carry. One way to accomplish this is to collect adequate amounts of food from each household in each of the courtyard. Obviously, this is very cumbersome procedure, and so the Mishnah considers a more practical solution. So I guess cumbersome means annoying or difficult.
It's complicated, hard.
Complicated.
I don't know.
Yeah. So how do we make a shituf for movi? Maniach sachavis. One place is a barrel containing his own food. And he says, and declares, let this belong to all the residents of the movi. And he confers ownership upon them. Through his adult son or daughter, or through his Jewish manservant or maidservant, or through his wife, but he may not confer ownership through his minor son or daughter. He's not allowed to use his Canaanite slave or slave woman. Why? Because their hand is like his hand, and he cannot confer ownership for the shituf upon the other resident of the mavoi. It is still under his control. So Amar Yehuda Chovis shel shitufim mevois, regarding a barrel of donated food that is being used for shitufim mevois, tzarich lagbia min hakarka tefach. The proxy, the one who is being sent to do it, must lift at least one tefach from the ground, the barrel, about 5 inches. Otherwise, it remains in the domain and the control of the original owner. So the idea is that the original owner should not own it anymore. It needs to be owned by everybody else. That's what we learned in the Mishnah, conferring ownership. He has to give the ownership away. He has to give it to everyone. So by lifting it off the ground, it removes his ownership. These laws were propounded by the elders of Pumbedita Chadu, and one is this aforementioned ruling that the barrel must be lifted a tefach off the ground. Idach, the other law concerns a mekadesh, one who recites kiddush over a cup of wine. Im tam lugmov yotza, if he tastes a mouthful of wine, he has fulfilled his obligation. Ve'im lav lo yotza. If he has not fulfilled, if he did not drink maloi lugmov, he did not drink a mouthful, he did not fulfill his obligation. Amar Chaviva anisami ani ha nami saved pumbedita amrinu. This ruling was also propounded by the elders of Pumbedita. We may kindle a large fire on the Shabbos to warm the room for a woman who has given birth. Sovo Minait was originally understood from this ruling. For a woman who has given birth, we may indeed kindle a fire, but for a sick person, we may not. It was also originally understood that during the winter, we may indeed kindle a fire for a woman who has given birth, because the cold is dangerous for her. But for during the summer, we may not, since there is no danger. If someone let blood and then felt cold, we may kindle a large fire for him on Shabbos. I guess it's very dangerous for him. Even in the time of the summer, even in the time of Tammuz, summer solstice, we conclude that kindling a fire is permitted for any dangerously ill person who feels cold. Amema reports another pronouncement of the elders of Pumbedisa. Amar Amema. Amema said, this ruling was also propounded by the elders of Pumbedisa. Eizu Asherah Stam. Which tree is presumed to be an Asherah tree? A tree that was used for idol worship. Amarav called Shimshalsi of the Gulum Shem Isa. Any tree that is guarded by an idol's attendants. And we do not taste its food. To Shmuel Omar Kiron Damre, for example, if the attendants say, these dates shall be for beer in the temple of the local idol Nitzalfe, which they drink on their holiday. The halacha accords the opinion of Shmuel.
Anyway, it's the key thing will help him, because then he doesn't have to worry about being there like at 7 o'clock if he was running out.